I'm Jenny Robertson, founder of the On Purpose Woman Global Community and founder and publisher of On Purpose Woman magazine. I'm here with Beth Knaus to talk about her article in the September-October issue of On Purpose Woman magazine. Beth, welcome. Thanks for being with me.
Thank you so much, Jenny. It's such an honor to be chosen to be in the magazine.
I love what you write about. And in the last issue, well, first, before we start that, tell our viewers what you'd like them to know about you.
Sure. So I am a copywriter and also a messaging consultant based just south of Boston, Massachusetts. And I just really love to write for female entrepreneurs who know they're good at what they do, but they really have no idea what their voice should sound like
Mm.
in all of their communications. And so they need help refining that voice and then infusing it into all of the copy and content that they put out there for people to read so that they can attract the right people to them. Not everybody, just the right people. And so, yeah, I love that. I love it. I love to help people get to that place of confidence where they're comfortable talking about themselves. And because so much of it, right, is also when we introduce ourselves and when we're in a networking group or on a podcast or on an interview like this one, that we are comfortable talking about who we are and we know what language represents us best.
Yeah, you bring up a great point because I think often when me initially, when I would hear the term copywriter, I would think somebody sitting with an eye shade, like, and their pen, like fixing other people's work or making things sound better. And you do that, but yet it's not just about the written word for us to just, like the published written word to be what's all published. What am I trying to say? A book or an article.
Right.
It's about our everyday, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. When
And
your first article, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was going to say a lot of people don't realize, about what that is. Like just what you said, that copywriting is, also helping people come up with the words for videos and just generally whatever it is, however they say what they say about their business, whether it's in writing or whether it's spoken. So,
Well, there's a great tagline. Whatever they say about their business. I like that.
yeah.
So your article is called What's the Big Deal? Storytelling Part Two. And in part one, which was in the July-August issue, you shared the importance of storytelling to capture interest in our businesses. And then in the current issue, you went deeper on that and you shared how do we actually tell our unique story and how that helps to define our personal brand. And so you talk about how we all get thrown into, and I think this is my word, I'm not sure it was yours. I call it a big pile of sameness, you
Hmm.
know, and we need to set ourselves apart. So, how is this type of storytelling that you talk about different from, say, a memoir or a marketing piece?
That's so interesting because one of the things I say often is that like, it isn't memoir writing, it's marketing. And so there's a strategy behind the marketing piece where you have to think about what bits am I going to share that are going to be productive. It's kind of like, when you're having an argument with somebody and in your mind you might want to say this one thing, but you know what you're going to say, you want it to be productive, like you're working towards a positive consequence. And so I feel like that's definitely part of it. So I urge people to share their personal experiences, but oftentimes people think, oh, I have to share an experience from the beginning through the dread of it and or through the, sometimes it's a really positive challenge, right? Where people are like, oh, I don't want to brag that I had this really great skill or I won this contest or whatever, I have this accolade. And that's not really what it is. Either way, you're challenged. And somewhere in there, you took something out of it that you learned that nobody else has. And
Mhm.
if they do have something similar, they don't have the same mix of those gems as you do. And
Mm.
so that's really where your individuality lies, is in these moments along the way. I feel like that sounds a little hallmarky, like throughout your life, these moments that but that's, we all look back and certain things come to our mind about what we experienced in life. And there are strengthening factors out of all of those, right, that have affected our perspective and our philosophy. And those things are definitely the base of how we choose to do the work that we do.
You gave some great examples of yourself? Because in your article go, would you like some examples? Of course you will. And you gave some really fun examples. Pick your favorite one, or if you have a favorite that you didn't share, and share it with us, because then I want to have some questions about whatever one you pick.
Okay, so I'm going to pick the one that I think is probably the most controversial, and that not that I struggle with it today, but it comes up again and again. And this is my choice to not wear dresses. Like,
Mhm.
I'm just a pants girl. I'm just a pants and a thick-heeled kind of girl. I don't want stilettos. I don't want to wear a dress. I did just wear a dress to my daughter's wedding last year because I couldn't find the pants I wanted as mother of the bride. So I did wear a dress, but I avoid them at all costs.
Is it a long dress?
No, it wasn't. It was
You wore a
past
short
my
dress.
knees. Just past my knees. Yeah, it was pretty.
What you do for love, right? Yeah.
Yes, of course, of course.
So you're a copywriter. You help women craft words that helps define them and their business. If someone read that about you, or when they did, obviously it was in the magazine, what do you want them to know about you? Because it has nothing to do with your work. And I think that's maybe where some people get confused. They think, well,
Right.
your story should tie into what I'm offering or what I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think for me, there's this piece to it that it's more feminine to wear a dress than it is to wear a pair of pants. Or in certain ways, right? Whether it's about being conservative or following what you were taught or those sorts of things.
Mhm.
But I don't feel comfortable. Um, I don't feel comfortable in a dress. I'm like, when I'm wearing one, I'm thinking about, is my bra showing? What my pantyhose are rolling, or, I'm uncomfortable, or what if I spill something on this beautiful fabric, or, all these things I get consumed by, and they distract me from being myself in the
Mhm.
moment. And not that I couldn't, spill on a pair of pants or whatever, but I just feel like it's freer for me. There's more freedom for me. I don't worry about moving around. I don't worry what people can see and can't see that they're not supposed to. I just
Yeah.
feel more comfortable. And I like the idea of just being able to move and not worrying about, oh, if I sit this way, can someone see up my dress? Or just too much to think about for me.
Yeah. So what that says to me about you is
Uh-huh.
that you're somewhat of a free spirit,
Hmm.
but you honor comfort over other things. And I think that's really important, especially for women, to be able to let go of those have tos or those we shoulds. Because I'm younger than you. I grew up in an era when girls, even teenage girls, were expected to wear like panty girdles
Yeah.
with those little things that held your stockings up. This is fortunately pantyhose did come out, but
Right.
panty girdles, I weighed 115 pounds, and it's like, and my mother thought I should wear girdles so my bone wouldn't show through my clothes, like like to smooth the bone out, like
Right.
I forget
Right.
what that bone is called, the pelvic bone, right there.
Right. Sure.
And yeah, and so it's just crazy stuff. So I applaud you, and I think it does say something about you and that you're fun and that you're upfront and that you really don't care if people think you should wear a dress or not. You're going to be comfortable.
Yes.
And so that sounds like somebody I would want to work with. So thank you for making that connection because it's not just about what you know and how you can help. It's like
Right.
don't we all want somebody we can work with that who's going to have fun with us? Well, maybe not everybody. Some people want the real serious people. They really do. The
Exactly.
ultra serious, and they need that. I don't. I want some levity to my brilliance.
Here's the other thing that this goes just a little bit level deeper, is that if you are that serious person, I'm also letting you know that I'm not the best match for you. And I
Great
think a
point.
lot of the times we're afraid of that because we're like, oh, that could be a client. I'm going to lose that client. But if you take that client, the work is not going to be nice for you or them. It's not going to
Right.
be your best work.
Yeah.
So stand out and be the person you are, because you're going to attract the people that like your personality.
Yeah. Because you're right. If you don't, and I know this intimately from the early days, if you show up as somebody else, then that person expects to continue to see the somebody else. And should you start to shift or change or decide I'm sick of this, I'm going to do me now, there's probably gonna be a little hell to pay there with somebody. I mean, we find it in family relationships a lot. So why not in business, right? That people zone
Absolutely.
into what they want you to be. And it's not fair to either of us to be out there pretending to be something we're not. And if
Right.
that's the greatest message we can send young women today, it's like, yeah, do your thing, please. I mean, my generation said it a lot, do your own thing. And then we kind of sold out later, but it felt good at the time at least.
Yeah, but it's about, I mean, an issue that I feel like a lot of things swirl around for women in business is setting boundaries
Yes, yes, perfect.
and saying that doesn't work for me. And I think that although it can be awkward maybe or uncomfortable to do, once you do it, you'll feel so great about the fact that you set the boundary, right?
Right. In your article, you also said that sharing stories like that shows that you're a real human, possibly with flaws, and that everyone has some awesome stories and situations that opened our mind to something that helps you do your work in a really cool way. So, it's not about telling the most embarrassing things about ourselves, but it's about telling something that's relatable and that somebody goes, oh, she's a real person, or she's fine, like showing that side of her when some people would be pretending like that isn't her. And I've always thought the flaws were some of the most endearing things that we can, I remember one time being a keynote speaker for this big thing at Clemson University. I used to travel a number of cities and do these professional development for women seminars. And this one, I was the opening keynote speaker, and I don't remember the topic or anything, but I do remember I tell stories a lot when I speak. And this woman came up to me just, like getting ready to give me some advice. And she goes, I would have never told that story on myself. And it took me aback because I'm all of a sudden I go into doubt. Oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. And then I had the presence of mind to say, well, what is it about that my story that bothered you? Oh, it didn't bother me. It should have bothered you. I mean, she was just really, and I didn't know her. I didn't think it was worth having like a sit
Right.
down with her or anything. But it was interesting to watch my initial reaction to it, all initially thinking, oh, I'm wrong. I should have done something else. And then going, wait a minute. I love that story. It's
Yeah.
true. It tells people I'm obviously not somebody she should hang out with or
Right.
work with, right?
Yes.
And so, and it takes some courage to do that sometimes. And
Yeah. And
yeah.
sometimes I feel like when somebody reacts, and I say this to clients because sometimes they're like, oh, do I really want to say this like on my about page or whatever? I just feel like I'm a little exposed. And, the whole point is that if you don't have a problem with it, and that's part of who you are, again, it's like telling that person, but that person reads it and they react. They could very well be your client because they need to hear that thing you just said, right? Because most of
Right.
us are serving ourselves a lot of the time. That's what we're doing, but we're serving ourselves 5 or 10 years ago. And that might have been a reaction that you had about yourself 5 or 10 years ago. But now you're like, you know what? This is a part of my journey and this is what makes me who I am. And this is what I learned from it.
Yeah. That's so important, Beth, because I think, when we know a little bit more, we can reach back and share that knowledge with somebody else. We're all in our different stages of growth and development and transformation and everything. If we keep that to ourselves, if we're embarrassed by it, someone could be healed by our stories. I mean, it's not just about business, it's about somebody can be healed by reading something that we write,
Yes,
you know.
absolutely. Absolutely. And, one of the things I think people don't realize is that when you're working on your messaging or you're trying to get your brand voice or get it into your website copy, that it gets personal,
Mhm.
right? It can get personal about where you feel insecure or where you feel super strong about something. And there's nothing wrong with either. It's just a matter of, do you have to say these things? And if you do, let's find a way to say it that it's going to attract your client. And so the other surprise piece is that you hear people worry about using the word coach, and I don't say I'm a coach, but there's coaching in any of this one-to-one work where one woman is helping another. There's a bit of coaching that's going on.
Right.
Um, which I actually love. I love to champion women to say these things that really help them stand apart, and they show them that there's nothing to be uncomfortable about.
Right. Well, I had a recent experience I wanted to share with you because it ties in. I'm going to make it tie in somehow, I think, because I didn't think about it until we got on today. I went to a maybe just a week ago. I'm not sure. I think it was a week ago Sunday. I went to a writer's circle. It was a free to introduce people to this writer's circle. A friend of mine has been doing this for a few years. I've always wanted to attend one of them, never did. Showed up, a lot of women in the room. And one of the first prompt was what I most love about writing is. And I found myself thinking, I don't love anything about writing because I don't write enough to even know what I love. And I was been beating myself up. I should write more. I have a magazine. I should have something in that magazine every issue. And so I'm start writing, and we have 5 minutes. I've got to start, we're writing by hand. At least I am. And I start writing some stuff that has nothing to do with the prompt. And what I'm writing about is why is it so challenging for me to find women to submit articles to the magazine? It shouldn't be hard. Aren't there women out there who blah, 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 who think they're writers? And then I found myself thinking, but I don't think I'm a writer.
Yeah,
And so that evolved into something else. And then the next prompt was take what you wrote and turn it into something like a blog post, a Facebook post, a piece of an email, just because it was, supposed to be around. Some of these people were writers for their craft. I mean, that's what they do. But then there were other people there that I didn't realize until later were just, they'd never written hardly anything, just curious about writing. And so I'm looking at what I wrote and I said, this could be the beginning of an article for On Purpose Woman magazine. And I ended up started to just write. I finished it. I tweaked it some, but the title of the article is I'm Not a Writer. And I go through and I had this memory. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because it will be out on November 1st, but I had this memory of doing a workshop, and there was a woman there who was my age now. This was 20 years ago. And my workshop was called Getting Out of Your Own Way. It's one of my signature things that I've done over the years. And I ask everybody, why did you come today? And she goes, well, I'm 73 years old and I want to be a writer. And I said, do you write? And she goes, some. And I said, what do you most like to write about? And she told me, she lit up, her shyness went away. And I said, well, I think you might just be a writer. And she goes, how do you know? And I said, because you just told me you write. And that came flooding back to me. And I went, the wisdom of my 20-year ago self, I need her right now because I've been published in 4 books. I've written tons of articles for other magazines and stuff, but I'm not a writer because I had all this criteria of what a writer is. And so it feels like it's taking us off another path a little bit here, but I think it really isn't because I was pretty vulnerable about my my feelings about myself in that capacity. And I think so many people see me as this, she's got all together. She's, and it's, no, I don't. That's one, at least one place in my life I feel so darned inferior to other people because I made up all these stories about how easy it must be for them to write, all that stuff. And so what would you do with that other than put it in an article? I mean, what if you read that, you haven't read the whole thing, I'm putting you on the spot here, but I had to write it. This was written for me, but I also said at the very end, and when I claimed, I said, if you are a writer, reach out because I'd love to talk with you about submitting something. And if you're not a writer, reach out because I'm ready to have a conversation with you too. Kind of like hoping that somebody might see themselves in that and go, you know what? It's been too long.
I have to tell you, this is something that I have talked about over the years again and again. Like, I've never had a problem saying I'm a writer, and I'll say, sometimes I don't write that often, but I'm a writer. I love to write. And I have twice a month in the town I live in, I have like a writing group, and people come together and we write from prompts, like free writing, just practice. And people will show up and say, well, I'm not a writer. And I'll say, but you came to a writing group. Like, what are you doing here? And
Yeah,
I've in other workshops I've taught, I'll say to people, if you went out and played one game of golf, you would say, I golf.
true.
Right? If you said, did some other things, sometimes people played, soccer 30 years ago. Oh, I play soccer. I'm a soccer player.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not anymore, but you're still owning that. Like, if you're going to sit down and write, you're a writer. It doesn't really matter if you're published or not. It doesn't matter how many people have read it or not, or what type of writing or how consistently. If you're writing anything on the page, you're a writer. It's just the type of writer, or the level you aspire to or whatever. But it is funny. Writing is one of those things where people don't want to, oh, well, I'm not a writer. And
In fact, what came up for me as I was writing
exactly.
is that I'm much more comfortable with the title of published author than writer. But the craziness about that is I had to write to be a published author, so it's that insanity. It's that old stuff that just kind of, flies around inside our psyche, I think. So
Well, I'm going to tell you that I struggle with the opposite of that. So for the longest time, I would say I'm a writer, but I think that there was such a rush of people like self-publishing books,
mm,
especially in the business circle, that everybody was saying, I'm a published author, I'm a published author. And in my mind, I was like, well, I don't have a book, so am I not a published author? But you know what? I have had all kinds of stories in anthologies or things in your magazine, or so I am a published author.
isn't
So
it
now I say it.
interesting?
Now I can say I'm an author and I'm a speaker, and I say all those things. And it's just funny how our minds play with us that way.
It really is. I'm so glad you said that because, we're coming from the opposite pieces here and going, well, this is me, and oh, that's not me, that's you. And
Mhm.
it's all crazy making. It really is. So
Yeah.
thank you for indulging me in that because I was surprised by the end result. I
Yes.
really was. And I really, and so I joined this writers group for a year,
Mhm.
and I am pledging to myself to have something in my magazine for every issue.
Wow.
It
Hey,
could be 100 words, it could be 1,000 words. I don't care. Something in there every issue. So
nice.
stay tuned. Stay tuned. Now that didn't really take us off the path too much, did it?
No.
Bring us back. Use what I just told you and bring us back.
Okay. Okay. I think one of the things that I wrote down when I was making my notes for today is that, and maybe this kind of ties in, is like the origin of our values that separate
Mm,
us. And I don't necessarily mean, I mean, I talk a lot about it, and I think you do too, about these generational influences that we've had, and they weren't bad in the moment, or, not bad, but they served in the moment, but now maybe they don't serve. But at the same time, there are lessons that we probably learned, from the people around us that we bring forward. And a lot of that is nice personal story stuff. Like I talk about my dad all the time. My dad raised me. My dad was in recovery. And so I heard all of those statements that you hear people who follow the 12 steps say, but I live by those things, right? Like separate your facts from feelings, be accountable, using acceptance when things aren't going your way, letting go of things, like so many things to get through my day, my week, parenting, work, whatever. Um, I use those things. And so they're just there in the back of my mind. And then the other thing that I wrote in my notes is that, and I run into this a lot with clients, is that they want to say the things that they want to say that are important to them.
that's so true.
And it's not that those things aren't important, but it's not about what you want to say or how you want to say it. It's how the person you're speaking to needs to receive it. Because again, they're behind you 5 or 10 years. They're the novice and you're the expert. So if you're using all sorts of like industry vocabulary, or, sort of more prose like things, like somebody who's in need of your help, who's in a crisis, doesn't need to receive it that way, right? They need it
Some of those just buzzwords that are supposed to
and yeah,
fix everything, right? Yeah.
yes, exactly. And you need, because that's where you're going to make the connections of common ground,
Mhm.
is by making that whatever you're talking about relatable to that person, like they feel like you just stepped into their mind,
Wow.
right?
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. And when you were talking about your dad in recovery, I'm not in recovery. I made some decisions about imbibing in certain things years ago, but I've been volunteering for 22 years with a recovery organization in Baltimore that helps women recover from drug and alcohol addiction. And so I'm very close to that. And I've used the 12 steps in some things in my life. And so in that instant that you started sharing that, I just felt my heart just open towards you more. I already really like you, and I just had to say that out loud because it was such a real-time example of what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I just went, oh, felt that. So,
right.
and that could be a story that some people would be reluctant to share, maybe because of some kind of a judgment or something. But no, we're all out there healing from stuff.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you a quick flip of that story.
Yeah.
I don't know, a couple years ago, was it before COVID? No, it must have been right after COVID. I spoke on a panel in a conference and I was talking about this. So, what's your story really was the title of my thing, and how do people get into the nitty-gritty of their story? And I started to tell this background of how I got to this place of feeling how I feel about communication and how you should be able to, show yourself personally. And I mentioned this same thing about my dad being in recovery, and I saw a young woman roll her eyes. And
Mm,
I thought to myself, it's one or two things, right? Either I'm not for her or I just hit the hot button, right?
yeah.
One or
Yeah.
the other. And as much as people are afraid of that, that's what you want to do, right? We
Wake
hold
people
back
up.
from that. But yeah, and then I know either maybe she will need me when she comes to terms with it,
Mhm.
or maybe I'm not her person, and that's okay.
Or maybe she'll go home and something else will open and you'll
Yes.
never see her again, but something could have shifted or yeah. We never know the impact we're having. And I think that that's why we need to personally, I think it's rather selfish of me if I don't share all of me because it's it could change somebody's life. Or it
Mm-hmm.
could change somebody's moment at least. I'm getting a little ahead of myself there, but I'm thinking about my friend Laura DeFranco who has this writing circle. And Laura she talks about what if that one thing you were afraid to share would change somebody's life?
Right.
And but we may never know, but what if it could?
Right.
And we didn't do it because we were afraid of judgment or afraid of rejection or embarrassment or something like that. So it's just not going to be about us. And in the meantime, look at all the good we're doing, even if it doesn't turn into a client, right?
Right. Right. Absolutely.
I'd rather be spreading that than some other stuff. So, oh, I love this topic so much. Thank you. What do you say to someone? I don't think we've covered this quite like this yet. Someone who's concerned about oversharing, like how do you decide for yourself what is too much information? What is appropriate maybe for my audience?
Right.
You have any rules about that or thoughts about
Um, I don't know if I have rules as much as it's kind of like a gut thing and
that?
awareness because, and I'm always very careful when I say this because we all know a handful of people who maybe got led into what they're doing because they experienced some sort of tragedy or trauma.
Mhm.
And it's really hard, especially the closer you are to it. I think, of course, I'm not a psychologist by any means, but it's if you're closer to it, it's harder to separate again that facts and feelings piece, right? Of you're not doing it necessarily to pour your heart out. You're doing it to see that while I was going through this, these were the places that were challenging, and this is what I had to do to get through them. So
Mhm.
you're talking about that piece of it. You're not necessarily talking about the nitty-gritty details or how scared you were, or devastated you were, or, and I hope I'm saying this clearly. There's this fine line, right? Like between memoir and marketing. Are you opening a vein and giving all the details? No. You want to say in a general sense, I grew up in this crazy environment. Like I often say, I was an only child. I grew up in this crazy environment, but I also was an observer. Like I was really aware, and you and I have used this term before, hypervigilant. Like
Mhm.
I know when somebody changes their facial expression, what that means and what emotions they're going for, right? Or when voices raise, I know maybe it's time to get the coats and we're going home. Or, I just have this intuitive sense of what's happening around me. And it really helps because like when I talk to a client and we're on Zoom, I always want to be on Zoom because I want to see your facial expressions. I want to see, your tone of voice, your energy. What are your mannerisms? What colors are you wearing? Because I feel like all those things say different things to me. And I don't know that everybody feels that way, right? Everybody's got their own set of skills that they use, but so I have that observation, right? That sense of what's going on and what do I need to say or do to kind of balance it out. And I don't know. And I know that I do it, and somebody else might say, "Oh my God, that's amazing that you just did that." And I'm like,
Can't help
"No,
it. Yeah,
it's natural to me." And I think that's really the piece of it too, is what's natural to you? What are those natural things? Because you learned them somewhere, and chances are you learn them as a defense or a safety piece
right,
from
right.
something else. So that's really what you want to share with people is I got to the other side of X, Y, or Z, and I walked away with these tools in my toolbox.
Mhm.
So I hope that answers the
Well, it
question.
does. Yeah, it did. There's a woman writing an article, submitted an article for this next issue about having a dark night of the soul. And what you're talking about is perfect because she didn't even know how she got there. It wasn't like something big happened and she was like plummeting, but she noticed herself and she took us through some of that, but then she took us into the solutions, and then the things that she used herself to heal herself to some extent, and the help that she got from other people, and which I could see people reading that, and she's a writer. That's what she does. So not necessarily looking for clients, but looking for a connection. And so I don't know, I think I want to leave somebody with at least a little bit of a solution rather
Yes.
than just here you go, here's my stuff.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, Beth, how can our viewers find out more about you?
So they can, of course, go to my website at www.that'saspade.com and they can email me, Beth Knaus at That's a Spade. They can find me on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, and I love to connect with people. And I think those are all the places.
Okay. And so we're going to have all that as soon as we finish up here. All of that will be in the text of this video. And also you have something that you offer on your website. That's like a freebie, I think a gift of some
Yes,
sort.
yes.
That's still happening, right?
Yeah, so that's a workbook. It's called Communicate with Confidence, 3 Steps to Mastering Your Business Message. And I do a pretty intense, I call it the voice and vision process when I work with people because it's not just a questionnaire. It's definitely a deeper dive
Mhm.
into the nitty gritty. And so in this freebie, it's 3 of those major questions, and it just talks about how do you address questions like this? How do you pull out all the details? How do you really get the information down that's going to be valuable when you are working with your voice and your messaging?
Yes. And that link will be in the text of this video.
Awesome.
So thank you. And as we wrap up, you want to share a final thought with our viewers?
Wow. I guess wear the pants. I mean, be be yourself. People are going to love you for yourself, and people are going to work with you for yourself. And if you're trying to be somebody else, you're doing both of you a disservice.
Perfect. Create a meme for that. Okay. So thank you. Thank you, Beth, for sharing your wisdom, your humor, your love of what you do. I really appreciate you. And I'm glad that we connected in that speed networking thing a few months back. I mean, we've seen each other a lot since then, haven't we?
We sure have. Yeah. And I'm really grateful. I love these chats that we have. I love being able to put them out for viewers and be part of the magazine. It's all been really nice for me. So
Okay. So the link to the magazine is in the text of this video, and go there and check out Beth's article in this current issue, which is September, October. And you can also read the part 1 in the July, August issue of On Purpose One magazine. And we're working on the November, December issue. Beth has an article in that one that has nothing to do with what we've been talking about in the last 2. And you're going to have to wait and see what that's about, but it's really good. So Beth, thank you so much. I appreciate you. And I want to thank anyone who's watching this Real Women, Real Purpose talk show. For more information on the On Purpose Women Global Community and magazine, please click on the link in this video and be sure to check out Beth's information for all that she offers. And for more interviews with amazing women living their lives on purpose, check out our YouTube channel, also in the text of this video. Have a great day, everyone.